Hi everyone! Today I'm going to be walking you through a matting tutorial based on the matting that we do at Emporia State University in the Norman R. Eppink Art Gallery. Today we are going to work with an art piece by a student named Zoe Gillis. She's a senior and she is a painting and printmaking major, and she was nice enough to allow me to record using her piece, showing you all how to do some matting. So let's get started. We're going to start off by measuring our window for our mat. So you see on this corner there's a torn piece, so we're actually going to measure up a little bit and not include that in the window of the mat. So I'm going to be showing you how to measure around that and what math to use to do that. So we want to include everything we can in the image as long as it's not that torn piece. So I'm going to measure from the edge of that cigarette to the edge of the flowers on the other side. So I'm going to grab a notebook in this video and show you how I usually do it. I draw a rectangle that is meant to look like the mat that we're going to create so I can visualize what we're doing. So the width of our image is going to be 7 1/4 inches. So I'm going to write that down. And of course we don't want to show that torn edge, so we're going to go up a little bit. And we're going to find that our measurement for our height is going to be 9 1/4 inches. Then, using those measurements, we will subtract 7 1/4 from 16 and 9 1/4 from 20. So we're going to do 8 3/4, 10 3/4. So we're going to change that to 8 6/8, and then we're going to do 10 6/8. Divide by 2, so we got 4 3/8, and 5 and 3/8. That's how you do that, because we can measure that on a ruler. Okay, so what that means is for our width, that's this whole section, that on either side of the window is that 4 3/8 measurement. 4 3/8, 4 3/8. And then for your height, it's the same for this measurement. So 5 3/8, 5 3/8. And one thing you can do for this is often, if there's a large amount of space on either side, on top and on bottom, you can make it weighted. So that would be where we would slightly change it to where this would be, instead of 5 3/4 evenly on both sides, there's a little bit more on the bottom. So it would be 5 4/8, and 3/8 was the measurement before. So 5 4/8, which is 5 1/2, and this would be 5 2/8, which is 5 1/4. So that gives that would be a just a 1/4 inch more on the bottom, but it gives this illusion that there's more weight on the bottom, so that way the image isn't falling off the page or falling off the mat. So you don't have to do that. You can keep that same equal measurement, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it weighted because that was the way that I was taught. And it does look pretty nice, so you'll see that at the end. So now that we have our math, we are going to measure 4 3/4 in from each side, and then we're going to do 5 1/4 from the top and 5 1/2 from the bottom. So I've sped up this next part just because all I'm doing is making some tick marks on the mat board. So what I'm doing is I'm actually creating 3 or 4 tick marks with each measurement. So whenever you draw the line for where you're going to cut, it is more likely to be correct than just using one measurement, because your measurement might be skewed. Another important thing to remember is that when you're writing or drawing on one side of your mat, make sure it's the back of your mat. You can tell because the front will have more of a tooth. Also, the shipping code, the item code will often be on the back. I often draw a little B in the bottom corner of the back, so that way I know it's the back whenever I cut these, because sometimes it is hard to tell. So make sure you're paying attention to that. So we have a loose blade. When you have, this is the back of your mat, like I said, this is the front. So that means when you cut into it, you're gonna cut at a beveled edge, which means you're not gonna go straight down. You're gonna go like this. You want to make sure that you're cutting at this angle on all sides. Because when you flip it around, it's gonna have that inward buckling edge, so it looks like it's supposed to for your picture. But we have a mat cutter here, so we don't have to use this razor blade for this part. So this edge on the right is our straight edge. That's how we get the outside lines of our mat board info for. This one on the left is our beveled edge. Like I described to you before, it has the razor blade at an angle. So whenever it cuts into the window, it cuts in at that angle on the back, so that when you turn it around, it'll have that angle coming in, so it looks like it's really framing the image. And this goes all the way down, all the way down. When you're using a machine like this, I'll show you in a minute how I do the marks, that you want to start off slow and light, then go a little heavier and heavier. We use this piece of foam core on the bottom just to make sure that we don't damage our machine. It's supposed to be measured to where the blade won't go all the way through, but sometimes, when people fiddle with it, the blade gets loose or it gets pushed too far down. That can cause damage to the machine. So we just like to take extra precautions so we can keep it for as long as possible. So this part I probably won't show you while I'm doing it because I don't have the setup, I don't think, for that. This is the setup I'm using to hold the top of my camera right now, so that way I can show you my matting over there. But I will show you at least what I'm gonna do. So here I have, oh, my depth perception is off. I have my beveled edge that's gonna go, I can check it and see how it matches up with the line. Check it on the other side, make sure it matches up. So with this, you can actually start a little bit beyond our line, maybe like that much, and go in, but you're gonna go in light. So that means it's gonna actually cut each corner. Otherwise, if you just start at the edge here, which you can, then your corners might still be stuck to your mat when you're done, and you can just use that freehand razor blade like I was showing you to cut it out. So that might happen when I'm matting today, because I often don't like to overcut just in case it messes it up and you can see it on the other side. So I will come back to you in a few minutes when I have this cut up, and you will see how it's done. Another tip is that with a mat machine like this, always have your mat where most of it's hanging off this side if you're doing the inside of the beveled edge, because we're cutting at this angle. If you have it hanging off that side, it's going to be cutting the opposite angle that you want. So, be back in a few. So our next part is we're going to take some kneaded eraser or regular eraser and erase that graphite on the back of the mat board where we had our lines before. This is going to help protect any transference of graphite onto the pieces that we are matting. We don't want to mess up anyone's artwork. So another alternative to this would be to, make lighter or thinner lines, but this is just the method that I prefer, so that way I can see it better. Then we're going to take our loose razor blade. Of course, you can use an X-Acto knife or something else if you have a protective cover. We just have some loose ones in the office because we have to change them out for the mat cutter all the time. So I'm using a loose one just to pinch off those edges that I didn't cut fully into before. And then once I pull that out, then I'm going to take some sandpaper. We use about 150 grit sandpaper to really smooth out those edges. We want to make sure there's no little flyaways or fuzzes in the actual mat window when we put it all together. Another cool thing about the sandpaper is that if you see any imperfections or any stains that get on the mat board while you're creating, you can use the sandpaper to sand off those imperfections. It actually works really nicely, especially for white mat board. So if you do notice anything like that, if eraser doesn't work, try a little sandpaper. Now that we have our lovely window that is finished and sanded, we are going to get our foam core. We have a piece of 16 by 20 foam core to match our mat board. The kind we use is about 1/4 of an inch thick. You can get thicker or thinner if you want. There's also different colors out there. This is the kind that we use though. Now you're going to get a few tools. We have some double-sided tape and a tape gun dispenser, which is so handy. We have some packing tape. We're going to get some scissors and some archival tape to hold our piece in place. So we have two different kinds. We have some actual tape. We have some mounting corners or some strips. For this today, we're just going to be using that archival tape that I showed you before. So now we're going to place down our mat window with the back facing up, the front facing down, and we're going to create a hinge between our foam core and our mat board. You don't want this foam or tape to show on the outside, so that's why you're doing it on the inside. Now you're going to take your packing tape and you're going to cut a couple strips about 4 inches a piece, and you're going to place them like so, holding your mat board and your foam core together, creating that hinge. And now you have your mat piece. Yay! They're put together and they're ready to put your art piece into. Woohoo! Now we're going to put our mat piece down and we're going to grab our art piece. We're going to place it inside, put the top back on, and we're going to line it up how we want it to look in the mat window. So you can use museum quality archival clubs for this. If you have very clean hands, you can also, do what I'm doing. You always make sure that you wash your hands as well as possible, get all those oils and dirt off there. So this is the placement that we're going to go with for this piece in the mat window, and we're going to use some of this archival tape. You want to use about 2 inches per strip, and you're going to want to get 4 strips for each corner. Since this is not a hanging mat piece, a floating piece, we are going to do just the top 2 corners. So all in all, you'll need about 4 strips of this archival tape. Now that you have your pieces of tape torn off, you're going to take 2 pieces, one of which you're going to have the sticky side down, the matte side up, and you're going to stick your other piece of tape underneath it on the sticky side. It creates this cross section. Now your top one, flip it over, so you're going to have the sticky side up and the sticky side underneath. Now you're going to place this under one of the corners. So hold your piece tight so it doesn't slide around, and you can tape it to the mat board this way. I like to use this packing tape just to roll it to keep it nice and taut on there instead of using my fingers, so I don't use oils. And we're going to do the same thing to the other corner as well. The cool thing about archival tape like this is that once, if the person wants to take it out of this mat, you can just get a piece of cloth or a paper towel just slightly damp and just kind of rub it against that tape, and it's gonna release the glue, so that way it doesn't damage the piece. Now comes a really fun part where we get to use the double-sided tape gun. Woohoo! Everybody's favorite. So this stuff you only need a little bit, so we're gonna do a couple of little like sections on each side. You don't need to run along the whole piece, just like so. Boop. Now we're gonna close our window and we're gonna press down so that way it creates a nice seal around the image. And there you have it. There's your final piece. Ta-da!